What you're seeing is a working claw machine in vanilla Minecraft. It took some time to get it working, but man, am I excited to finally show it off. I'm not only showing you how it's used and the engineering behind it, but I'll also delve into some tricks that I implemented to make it feel like an arcade machine. Because that's the X factor when doing a redstone build. As technical Minecrafters, we shouldn't be satisfied with stuff simply working if you know the exact way of handling it. No, it's our job to make a redstone contraption that works and provides an experience that's intuitive for non-technical players to use and appreciate. So let me show you how to use this puppy. All you need to know is that there are 9 toy preset buttons and 1 reset button. The lever right here is just for turning on the side lights, and we have another lever near the top to turn on the dripping lights. You saw both of these in the intro. And it's super simple to use the machine. You can see the 9 toys inside the glass casing. And to grab the toy that you want, you just press the button that corresponds to that toy's color and its location. If I want this green, very unfamiliar space alien toy, then I press the button at the top right that's surrounded by red. And you can see that each toy is surrounded by a specific color, which helps you know which button to press. After you press a button, there's a failsafe that prevents any other button from working until the machine is done moving. So this machine is 100% break proof, and that's a Corkus guarantee. Now that we press the button, the claw will come down and pick up our toy. Okay. Before you guys see how the claw picks up the toy, let me explain myself. I can just see a load of comments saying, the claw doesn't even look like it's picking up the toy. This is stupid. But hear me out. The biggest constraint that I put on myself when building this was to hide as much redstone as possible, including the pistons on the flying machine. This helps with the whole immersion of the arcade. So the only way to pick up the toy without having a flying machine loading station surround the toy itself was by making the claw go under the toy and scoop it up. So just pretend that the claw isn't grabbing the top of the toy, but wrapping around it and scooping the toy up from below, so the toy is always above the claw as it goes up. It can take some time for the machine to pick up the toy and deliver it out at the base, so I added a timer on the left side of the front panel. It starts blinking as soon as the machine turns on, and then slowly fills out a circle of lights. Once the lights fill out, the toy pops out of the base and is ready to grab. Except you can't actually grab the toy because it's, Minecraft. When we finally want to send this toy back and reset the machine, we press the big red button here on the top panel. The toy will then get pulled down and after some delay, pop back up in its original location. And that's the full thing. I mean, I have more to show you if you care about how it actually works under the hood and how I hid all of the redstone, but this is how to use it. Just press any button, wait for it to pop out of the bottom, and press the reset button to send it back to its position. You can grab the toys in any order you want and it always sends it back to the current toy's original location. And in the background is a sped up, non-interrupted run of me grabbing our Space Explorer toy and sending it back. At default tick rate, it takes about 3 minutes and 13 seconds to grab any of the 6 toys on the sides, but only 2 minutes and 40 seconds for the 3 toys in the middle. So I like to crank up that tick rate to speed up the whole process. Now let's look at how the machine works underneath. First, let's clean out these adjacent machines because they're blocking our view. And it's a little dark, so we'll move the claw machine outside. Okay, good, but we still need to get rid of the casing so we can actually see the redstone. And then zoom in. Perfect. What in the world am I looking at? Now, before you click off the video thinking this is going to be too hard to understand, let me invoke the age-old saying, there is no such thing as a bad student, only a bad teacher. I'm going to try my best to walk through how this guy works without anyone's head exploding. But first, a quick shout out to Scythern Plays, who suggested I use my previous mechanical system to create a claw machine. I wouldn't have thought to implement my machine in this particular way, so big shout out to him. I love hearing y'all's feedback, and your comments may very well impact one of my future builds. So don't hesitate to just comment your ideas and let me know how you think about my build. Now, over the past few years as a professional engineer, there's one key thing that I have learned, and it really opens up a lot of doors. Every complex system is really just a bunch of smaller, much simpler systems integrated together. So to understand this arcade machine, we must first break it up into smaller, simpler components. We have 7 systems to be exact: our timer, our button panel, our smart tiling system, and the docking system above it, our display case, then the claw holding layer, and finally our one-dimensional tile displacer, each performing their own unique task to bring this machine to life. To understand this machine, we have to first look at the smart tiles underneath. I won't be going into detail on how these exactly work. I have another video doing that for my working chessboard. Instead, I'll do a recap on what they do and how I modified them to build this arcade machine. At a high level overview, the smart tiles allow you to move any 4x4 object along a two-dimensional plane. We do this by first pulling the object down into a 2D displacement plane. Then we alternate between pulling half the object to the desired location and pushing the other half. Once both halves are at the final location, another flying machine pushes the object back up to the viewing plane. The main variation with the arcade smart tiles is that we catch the flying machine inside of a docking station during that final unload phase. That means that each and every toy is really stuck in the final process of getting dropped off at its tile. More on that later. With our chess implementation of the smart tiles, we needed full freedom to go from any starting position on the board to any final position. This means we sacrifice speed for flexibility. However, these smart tiles have been hard-coded. Every toy has the same final location, so there's no need to require a destination input for each one. They all end at the toy collector. So there's some additional wires around the smart tiles for this hard coding that I did, which is how you can move a piece by just pressing a single button, where in chess you had to press a button at the start and final locations. Lastly, keep in mind that as long as a flying machine is actively in use, we have a redstone line active around the machine, and this helps us know if the machine is currently working, which is used for our failsafes. If each toy is locked in its unload phase, that means we need something to unlock it, and that's where our claw system comes into play. I pulled out a single tile so we can easily see how to activate a claw. Above each tile is a redstone line, which for this example I can activate through this lever. When the line sends a signal, it activates a group of pistons that are stationed above the claw's flying machine observers. This prompts the claw to go down. Once the claw reaches the bottom, it's detected by a single glass pane above an observer, which then sends a signal underneath the toy to the system that caught the flying machine in the first place. This signal removes a redstone block, which deactivates the pistons that were used to catch the toy. When these pistons retract, it causes our flying machine to pull down the toy, which is not what we want, so we immediately dispense and retract a bucket of water to reactivate those pistons and push the toy back up one block. If you're wondering why I use dispensers in water, it's because dispensers don't stick to honey or slime blocks, so it doesn't interfere with the flying machine going back up. Right after the toy is repositioned, we have a double piston extender update the observers at the bottom of the flying machine, which is what tells it to start going up. Much like the dispenser in water, I use double piston extensions to create space so it doesn't get stuck on the honey or slime. I had to tinker with the timing a bit, but once the toy gets pulled up, it's always in sync with the claw, which I thought gave a pretty cool visual to make it appear like they're stuck together. Once the claw reaches the top, it docks back into the holding station and the toy is dropped off into our one-dimensional tile displacement system, which I removed so you can see the claw drop off more easily. We also have a fence observer detect when the toy makes it to the top, which sends the flying machine back down to the smart tile. I've gone ahead and pulled out a row of the one-dimensional displacement system so you can see the full functionality of the machine once the toy reaches the top. Turns out the fence observer you saw earlier actually does more than just sending the toy's flying machine back down. It also sends a pulse all the way to the end of the row, which does two things. It tells the tile below it to send up a flying machine, and it also activates another flying machine here at the top to go and pull the toy all the way to the end of the row. This top row is really just a modified version of our smart tile system, but it only works in one dimension and only has one drop-off location. It's crazy how much smaller you can make these things by removing just a single dimension and not needing a coordinate logical system. Now, once the flying machine starts pulling the toy, we have an observer above that detects the movement and initiates the flying machine on the other side of the row to start heading towards the toy to push it. All the while, our flying machine from below has slowly been making its way up, and once it does, it pulls down our toy into the smart tile system. Here's a side view of the whole process with the full machine so you can see how all of these systems are layered together in practice. And this brings us back to the smart tile system. So now the machine works like normal, where the same signal that activated the flying machine to come up and grab the toy also activated the smart tile below. And after a delay, it sends a signal to the front of the machine at the drop-off box's smart tile. But this is how our system gets the two inputs for the starting and final location, and where some of the hard coding occurs. I also put in some bypass wires that help speed up the movement process. If I know where the final location for the toy is, then I don't have to wait for our coordinate system to tell me. I can just preemptively start the necessary flying machines to go ahead and grab the toy. But each toy repeats this pattern. First, it gets pulled to the top, then the top consolidates everything to the back row of the machine, which allows us to hide the toy from the user's view. Once in the back, the smart tile does its job and brings any toy to the front box. Now, time for our timer, which was actually pretty straightforward. If you look underneath, you can see that we have 3 red lines, which correspond to the 3 rows of toys that we have, and then an orange line for the reset signal. We also have 3 hopper clocks, one for the ticking light in the middle, another for the 2 outside rows, and the last hopper clock was for the middle row. All 3 input lines converge to turn on the ticking light, since we always want that on while running. It was a little bit tricky to have the 3 lines feed the same signal without crossing the wires, but I was able to squeeze it in. These signals hit a copper bulb with a comparator, and as soon as it turns off, it unblocks our hopper clock that feeds the ticker. I'll show you how this automatically shuts itself off later. The circular lights work similarly. We have the input signal turn off a bulb, which activates that row's corresponding hopper clock. I believe the side row uses 29 items for the hopper clock, while the middle row uses 23. Now every time our hopper clock pulses, it deactivates a redstone torch that was locking a hopper, which allows a non-stackable item to flow down into a dropper. This dropper has a comparator on it, so as we feed it items, it slowly grows in strength, which activates more lights. We have 8 items in the system, so we're able to break up the clock into 8 light segments, which gives us a nice smooth counting visual. Once we press our reset button, we unload the dropper, which then turns off all of our lights and feeds the items back into the dispenser above the locked hopper. Lastly, to circle back on how the middle ticker cuts off automatically, we have a rising edge detector here that turns on once we reach full signal strength above. If you're unfamiliar with the rising edge detector, it's just whenever you output a single tick signal after an on state is achieved. Finally, the last system we have is our button panel, which may seem simple, but was actually one of the more complicated systems in the whole design. One of the reasons it was so difficult is partly because of how little space I had underneath everything, paired with the fact that each button does more than just send a signal to our claw at the top. This is a perfect example of how some of the most intuitive things to use are the most complicated to engineer. I went ahead and stripped out everything above the smart tiles so you can see all the wires coming out of the button panel connecting to the different systems in the claw machine. We have 3 primary veins of wire: red, orange, and white. I also added some emerald, diamond, and amethyst blocks around copper bulbs at the end of each wire so we can see how the buttons send a signal to each. Like always, I color coded the wires based on their purpose. If I didn't color code, there would be no way I can keep my sanity when building. The red wires are what you would expect the buttons to do. They simply connect to a line of observers that go up to power our claw at the top of the machine. You can see all 9 observer lines grouped in 3s around the sides. When this line is activated, it also pulls down the wool underneath each button, which means any future button press doesn't do anything. This is how we made it spam proof. The orange and white wires are both connected to the reset button. It's best to envision each orange wire as a broken connection to their tile. If you try to send a pulse to the tile, nothing happens. However, when you activate a button to bring down a toy, you activate that toy's red line, which concurrently reconnects that tile's corresponding orange line. That means when you press the reset button, all the orange lines try to send a signal to their tile, but only the tile that is associated with your toy has a connected line. So that's how we're able to ensure that the reset button sends your toy to the exact right location. Once that connected orange line passes a signal, it automatically re-breaks the line so no future signal can come through. Then we have the white lines, which are used to reset the the flying machine catchers underneath the toys. So we know for certain that once the toy is brought back to its tile and the flying machine goes to drop it off, it gets caught by the pistons. Otherwise, the flying machines would just keep going up and break the whole machine. If we look at the reset button, we have two disconnections that represent two logical conditions that must be met for it to work. First, do you remember that white line around the machine that stays on if a flying machine is active? Well, that's used for our first condition. You can't reset the machine if it's already running. The second condition is that we can only reset the machine if the drop-off box has received a toy, which we can determine by an output signal that all tiles give off once an object is loaded into it. Much like the orange line, this rule resets after one use, so all subsequent reset pushes won't work until another toy has been dropped off. Lastly, the white line that is on while the flying machines are active has a falling edge detector that sends a pulse to reset all of the wool underneath the buttons, which was meant to stop button spamming. And that's it. That's how this entire system works. Well, if you pull this lever, I also have a banger of an arcade song over here in the jukebox. But yeah, that's it.